All right, this is a bad one. Time to weigh in on the dungeon controversy, which is the number one trending gaming story on Twitter and Reddit right now, and is just not a great look for Bungie. And it bothers me that like every time Destiny really seems to break out with news, it's because of like some sort of drama like this. Or I think the time it happened before this was Forsaken content vaulting, things like that. And it's just kind of a bummer that this keeps happening. Um, the reaction to this news is all over the place. I have some people saying this is not a big deal and why is everyone complaining, and then other people saying that the article I wrote today is not complainy enough and I'm not taking it seriously enough, and I'm giving Bungie a free pass and I'm a shill and all that usual stuff. I think for me, the answer lies somewhere in the middle here. To recap briefly what's going on, it was confirmed yesterday by Cosmo that the dungeons that are coming out over the next year can only be picked up. Evie, he's making weird noises, and hopefully she didn't throw up on my foot just now. No. The dungeons that are coming out in the upcoming year here can only be picked up as part of the Witch Queen Deluxe bundle, which is $80, contains the Witch Queen, contains the season pass for all 4 seasons, and it contains those 2 dungeons. It cannot be picked up past that, so you can't just buy Witch Queen and then later buy only the season pass and then get the dungeons. Bungie has said that you can upgrade the deluxe edition, so like you can go from the $40 to the $80 one, but that's kind of just like buying the season pass. But then they also said that there would be a way to buy the dungeons separately outside of these bundles. So this is the headline everyone is taking away from, that Bungie is now selling individual dungeons. We've seen this already with the anniversary event coming up, where they are quite literally selling a dungeon independently for $25, which includes Gallarhorn and some other stuff. But that was kind of the test case for this. But now it seems like they are cordoning off dungeons as its own separate level of like, okay, we can sell this independently type content. One confusing aspect of this is that the math doesn't even make sense, because like if the base expansion is $40 and the season pass is $40, why would there be an additional cost to the dungeons at all? Because that's $80. So what would the dungeons cost? So it just seems like they're really, really kind of pushing people into buying these bundles or the deluxe edition and getting Witch Queen, and like using the dungeons as kind of a lever to force people to do that, or else you're gonna have to pay $10 a dungeon, or if you got her engram out, or something like that. That is just what I'm imagining the price would be, probably at least $10 a dungeon if we're being honest here. For me, the headline I wrote was that this is more about confusion than cost, and that got some pushback because people were objecting to the cost. But like the facts on the ground are like, if you buy the deluxe edition, nothing changes essentially from past year of pricing. Expansion is $40, season pass is $40. You're getting the dungeons. The end. But the confusion comes in the fact that you can buy the dungeons separately, and like we don't have a price for that, and it's just very confusing at a level where my biggest issue with this is that Destiny is already chopped into so many little ridiculous pieces, where we had, free to play content, and then we have expansion content, and then some of the expansions are getting made free briefly, and then we have seasonal content, and then all the while through all of this we have content vaulting, in which stuff goes away. So we lost the first 2 years of the game, we're losing the first expansion, and then we lose seasonal content once a year now at the same time. And now free-to-play content has been cut down to practically nothing at this point, and just really random things are free-to-play content now, like Destinations, the Shahan intro mission, and then like randomly the Prophecy Dungeon and Vault of Glass raid, and like things like that. This also has to do with how kind of dungeons worked in the past, where 2 dungeons were tied to expansions. There's one in Shadowkeep, one in Forsaken, and then one was technically in a season. It was in Arrivals, and yet I think it was Arrivals, but it wasn't like you didn't have to buy Arrivals to get it. It just showed up during Arrivals. So the point is before this, they at least weren't like separated out as their own thing. And I can understand the Witch Queen not launching with a dungeon in theory if they have, other stuff going on. They have the raid, it's a big expansion, whatever. But the idea that now dungeons are like a sold separately piece of content only kind of furthers the narrative that Destiny is in too many pieces, is too confusing to get into, and is trying to monetize itself in too many ways. Like, the fact is, like, these dungeons can be free if you just buy the deluxe edition, if you're planning on doing everything, and yet the way it looks is that, Bungie is trying to force your hand to buy that edition, and then if you don't, you're going to get penalized by being charged 10 or 20 bucks for dungeons or whatever. So to me, like, this isn't a debate about like whether dungeons are worth 10 or 20 bucks. Like, dungeons are probably worth $10 in the grand scheme of things. It's just, I don't think that matters. Like, yeah, would I have paid $25 for the Deep Stone Crypt raid? Like, yeah, but that's a stupid model. Like, no one would have wanted to buy like the campaign of Beyond Light separately and then the raid for Beyond Light. Like, you're breaking the game into too many pieces when it is already broken into too many pieces and it needs to come together. And like, if the narrative, like, this is where I start getting in trouble, but like, if the narrative is like, okay, Bungie wants more revenue to be able to better support themselves and more projects and more expansions to the game, I would almost rather just have seasons cost $12 or $15 now than go through all this song and dance about this thing's free to play, this thing isn't, we're charging for dungeons here, like, you have to buy this bundle. Like, that to me is like more confusing than just like, okay, seasons are $15 now. And like, that is another move that I know would make everyone mad. But the other issue here is that we have to combine all this with the fact that in addition to all these kind of separate content drops and stuff, we still have Eververse. And Eververse is like probably as crazy as it's ever been to a certain extent, where we're getting, anywhere from 2, 3, 4 seasons of Eververse armor a season, to the fact that they're now selling transmog, something that I still am unwilling to let go and that I still hate. And it feels like way, way too much monetization in one package. And I am not saying that Destiny is not worth this, but I am saying we've gotten to a point where trying to get new people into Destiny or trying to get lapsed players to return to play content is like incomprehensible. And like, I this is a question I get asked a lot. Like, if I come back to Destiny, where should I start? Like, I play this game for a living. I don't even know how to answer that question still. Like, I literally do not, because of all the different expansions, all the different seasons that are ongoing, and then what's free. Like, it's already not formatted well for new players. But then for veteran players, you have a situation where we have already paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars just for new content alone, even excluding wailing out on Eververse, like for all the expansions, all the seasons. Like, we have paid $1 bazillion, and this just seems like one more thing that you're layering on top of things where, to truly get everything now, it's like, $100 for the year, which includes 3 dungeons that you can't get unless you do spend that $100 in total, even if you would have spent that anyway over the course of the year. Like, it doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel good, and it doesn't look good. And I think that is where one of the core issues lies here, rather than, this is physically too much money, or it's just too annoying to buy the deluxe edition, which you would have bought anyway. Like, it's more of a presentation and structural issue to me than like the extra $10 or whatever is going to make all the difference. It is an aspect of it, and it's all threaded together, but this is such a complicated issue that monetization in Destiny is already complicated, and like, this is only increasing that further. And you have done something wrong in your marketing and packaging when you are trending as like the top story in gaming for what at least looks like trying to nickel and dime your consumers by separating out content that was not previously separate. And I do not think that is going to be something that works in their favor, because if every time Destiny's making the news, it's for something like this or for something like content vaulting, like, that is not a good narrative, even if like the core of the game is still fine and like it is in a a much better spot than it used to be. Like, it is hard to convince people to play the game when stuff like this keeps happening. And this seems like something that could have just been avoided. Like, they could have just given us a dungeon with Witch Queen and then added a dungeon to one of the later seasons, like kind of like they did with the Rivals, and they probably still would have sold a whole lot of deluxe editions. Like, I just don't get why this needed to be separated out in the first place. And it is hard for Bungie to make the case that like Destiny is not making enough money. Like, they're a private company. We don't have aspects, we don't have insights into their financials and stuff, but like, this is a game that has clearly supported itself enough to, be this self-sustained ecosystem where they have at least 3 more expansions mapped out already. It has supported an expansion of Bungie to like triple the size of their headquarters, to incubate half dozen new games or however many they're going to end up making, and then to expand Destiny's IP into TV and film and other potential games and stuff like that. Like, Destiny is clearly very successful. So when we see moves like this seems like, I saw one analogy where this seems like something a desperate free-to-play game would be doing to like squeeze the last drops of money out of people and like to try and like get people back. But like, Destiny isn't that game. It doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need to put itself in the situation. And it just, all companies want to make more money and, have more funds to build the game bigger and pay their workers more and whatever. But like, it is hard to make that case here when we have seen how successful Destiny has been for Bungie over the years and how much it has allowed the company to grow. So I don't think that argument kind of lands. And like, not that Bungie's even saying that out loud, but that's the only real answer here. And then the other thing they're doing is just not saying anything. They're just not talking about this at all, really. And granted, like, all of this was kind of known as soon as they started talking about the Witch Queen bundles in the first place. But I think the clarification just came out that the issue is that, like, we didn't know that they would be technically sold separately. And, like, if you just picked up a season, the dungeon wouldn't be in it if it came out during those 3 months or whatever. So I understand why this is blowing up now. And, like, I feel like people don't maybe get the difference between the line list of stuff that we saw before, which did look weird, but it didn't look, it seemed like, okay, but now it's, like, very clear that, okay, this is different. This is not a good look. So overall, I do not think this is a good idea. I don't know if they will change anything about it. I think they have already made a bunch of sales based on the current packaging, and to change that now might be shady in its own way. I don't know how they're going to respond to this directly, but I am willing to say this was a bad idea. Even if technically you could just buy the deluxe edition and be fine and not really have anything change from previous years, just the fact that they're doing this at all is bad, especially in the midst of how convoluted the game has become in terms of trying to piece it all together to get the complete Destiny package, because it is so all over the place. And then adding infinite Eververse monetization on top of that, and it's exhausting. And like, this whole thing is exhausting every time something like this comes up. And I guess this is the other side of the content vaulting debate, adding new content rather than taking content away. But like, both of these are kind of two halves of the same coin, where we now have a game that's like extracting out content and like making us buy all this stuff piecemeal, and then this thing looming over our head where we know it's not even permanent now, and like, who's to say this stuff isn't going to go away 2 years from now, and like, that's another bad feeling. So it's in a weird position right now, and I think Bungie just keeps doing things to make it worse rather than better, which is frustrating to see. And I hope they just start to kind of pull back and streamline things, simplify things, maybe reduce costs in some areas, maybe increase costs in other areas. But like, I do not believe that Bungie like needs Destiny badly to be more profitable than it is based on the past few years of how things are going. And I do not believe that these moves that they have been making lately are doing more good than harm in that department. And I think what they are losing in player morale and new player accessibility and stuff like that is not worth whatever money they're getting from dungeons or transmog synths or whatever. So that is my take. I'm trying to be like kind of multi-dimensional here rather than just being purely angry or purely confused or purely on Bungie's side or whatever. I think it is a complicated issue, but mainly because Bungie just made it too complicated and we didn't have to be in the situation in the first place. So anyway, those are my thoughts for now. We will see if this gets addressed in any way by Bungie today or in the TWAB. I mean, I honestly have no idea. A lot of this stuff seems a little set in stone by now, but I guess we'll see what happens. I think it would help if we knew more about the dungeons and their release timing and stuff, but all of that seems very far away, so I'm not sure if we're going to know any of that. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.